Welcome to The Effective Lawyer, a podcast for ambitious attorneys who want to improve their practice. My name is Jack Zinda, and I'll be your host. Hey everyone, Jack Zinda here. Today we're going to be talking about what it's like to be a lawyer later in life. For attorneys that start their legal careers their second or even third career, it can be challenging, overwhelming, and a little intimidating on where to start and what to do. Today, to help us talk through that is one of my favorite attorneys at our firm, Jason Aldridge. He's not only one of our top lawyers here, he's one of the top trial attorneys in Texas. He's been with the firm a little over 5 years and handles some of our most complex and important cases. Catastrophic injuries and everything from wrongful death, trucking cases, premises liability, and everything in between. Hey, Jason, good to see you.
Hey, Jack. It's great to be here. I love the podcast.
Good, man. Well, you didn't have to come along for the journey to join us today.
No, walked around the corner.
Well, not to put you on the spot or embarrass you, but what age did you become a lawyer?
I'm 47 now, and I've been practicing for almost 6 years, so 41.
So that's a little different than most attorneys' path.
Yeah, I stood out in my class, that's for sure.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Why don't you tell me a little bit about where you started prior to becoming an attorney?
Well, I was born in southern Arizona, like an hour and a half south of Tucson, which is also an hour and a half north of Mexico. I lived in trailer parks. We were kind of poor. I had a bunch of different dads. My grandfather, some of my dads were in the Army, and it was a little Army town. I always just didn't want to be poor, and at first that kind of was like, well, I'll be a doctor or a lawyer because that's the easiest way to not be poor. And then after high school, I joined the Army with the promise that it would lead to medical school. I had no interest whatsoever in being a doctor. I just, again, didn't want to be poor. I had always loved Law and Order and wanted to grow up to be Jack McCoy. And so I went to the Army, and I was playing golf one day, and I saw the head pro giving lessons to this beautiful girl. And then I saw him playing golf, and I thought, well, maybe being a lawyer or a doctor isn't it. So I left. When I got out of the Army, I became a golf pro. After that, I worked for, I had a small internship with a financial advisor, Merrill Lynch. I waited tables. I was a bartender. And then eventually I found my way to Vegas and got in the casino business and was really good at it and was succeeding and going places. But there was always one regret. I always wished that I wasn't somebody that could have gone to law school that I had. And my boss at the time was applying to go to law school, and hearing him talk about it was like a little stab in the arm. And I thought, well, I don't have 8 years. I can't wait 8 years to do all that. And then 8 years later, I was walking down the hall, and I heard one of the dealers that I supervised saying that all he had to do now was take the bar exam. And I thought, oh my God, everybody around me is living my dream. And literally that was 8 years ago. I'd be done right now. So my wife and I at the time, she said, well, just go to school. Just take the first step forward. I didn't have a single college credit, so I rushed to sign up for something so the mood wouldn't pass. I sent 35 emails to 35 professors to try to get in because it was in the middle of December and there's no classes starting, or there are very few. And I got into 3 classes, and that was it. I planned my degree like you can't imagine. I took 30 credits in one semester because I could stack 3, 4, and 5 week courses. And so I had to get permission from the president of the university to do it. And it took me having to go in to show them that I'm never going to be in any more than 5. But I got all of the credits to graduate in about 2.5 years for my 4-year. But then I had to wait a year because they did something with the transcript, and I couldn't graduate right away. And then I applied to law school, and here I am today. I actually was going to be a prosecutor, but the process was so long to hire that I really started getting nervous. To be honest, my wife started getting nervous because I wasn't working, and it was like, hey, you keep turning down these jobs. What if you don't get that one? And I thought, yeah, what if I don't get, never in my life was that a thought. Maybe, I don't know if we want to talk more about how I found Zinda, but once I came here, I knew this was it. I knew that I wasn't picking a different or second choice in terms of career.
Well, that's amazing. So not only law school while working full time, also undergrad as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, and baby and other stuff that I'm sure we'll talk about. Yeah,
That's really impressive. How's your golf game now?
it is absolutely terrible, but it is. I'm okay with that. It's. I'm still good enough that everyone can tell I was good before, and I'm still good enough to be better than most of the people I play with. But I'll take the trade-off.
Well, backing up a little bit, I find people that have a lot of good life experiences or interesting life experiences make the best trial lawyers. What part of your career can you think of examples where you took some of the skills that you learned at those different parts and applied them to what you do now?
Yeah, for sure. And I've tried to help a lot of the new attorneys within the firm on how to connect or how to sign a new client, for example. I think every job is sales to some extent, right? And if you've ever waited tables and you got to try to make 5 people happy, or you've sold, I also sold cars for a while. If you've ever done that, then you learn how to listen, and you learn that people will tell you what they want and they'll tell you what's important. And I don't think there's any one job, but there is the culmination of needing to connect with a variety of people that has definitely served me well to this point.
And when you worked at the casinos, what'd you do there?
So I was a pit boss. So casino, that job is probably the only one where you tell someone what you do and they're like, they have that quick imagination, and it actually kind of is that. Like if all the lawyers that are going to listen and you tell your friend you're a lawyer and they think it's one thing and it's not. So I was it's called a pit boss, a dual rate, which means that you can serve in either position. You're sort of bracketing a promotion. And so I would supervise near the end, and for the last 7 years, high limit gambling. And so it was a lot of famous people and a lot of really, really rich people. Unbelievable stories. Definitely I could fill 2 or 3 days and no one will be, after that I'm out, but I can fill a couple of days with some stories that people tend to love.
Well, that must have been interesting dealing with both the people you were supervising as the pit boss, then also really high net worth people who maybe aren't in the best mood or feeling great when they're talking to you.
Yeah, they are not. Nobody wins. So they are typically not. So depending on the nature of the customer, sometimes the job was, a lot of the big money would be Chinese players, and they didn't speak English and I didn't speak Chinese. But the game had a language, and you just sort of kept the room happy. Not happy because they're losing, but
Casino's happy.
Yeah. I've seen the casino nervous, that's for sure, but it all plays out in the end. But you have to make sure we don't make a mistake, because those are very, very expensive. You have to make sure that that you take care of the player within the limits of the rules. And if you think about it, I've supervised players making $1 million bet. So $1 million, as fast as we can deal the cards, that's $1 million. And you don't think of how long your mortgage takes and how much paperwork's involved. And not everyone's got $1 million mortgage. So it's pretty high pressure, but it was a blast. I never would have left the job for the job.
Well, just hearing you talk, there's several things that I think correlate to what it means to be a good trial lawyer. One is high pressure and moving quickly, but having to be accurate. I think in our profession, especially when you're trying a case, taking a deposition, or in a hearing, you have to be quick on your feet, but you also have to be accurate. If you misstate the law, that can have really devastating consequences. I'm sure similarly, if you pay out $2 million instead of 1.5, that can have some problems as well.
It sure can. It can have you watching a whole different kind of game.
Well, tell me back. All right, so you're doing well as a pit boss. You have a pretty successful career, and you make that decision to go to law school. Was that a tough decision?
No, I think it might have been a tough decision what to do with that degree when it was done, because I enjoyed the casino and they had a legal department, and I wasn't sure what I would do with it. The company helped. We had layoffs. I didn't get laid off, but there was some instability because of the housing market crash. And it became, what actually made the decision the easiest was having a kid. And we didn't want our daughter growing up in Vegas. The schools are the city is overflowed, so the schools are under a lot of pressure. There was 30 kids in her class, kind of thing, so, or would have been. And she asked my wife, "Mommy, how come those girls aren't wearing clothes on that billboard?" And we both thought, all right, I think it's time to live somewhere else.
All right, so you have a child, you're married, you're working. How did you balance your schedule going to law school and doing with all those other things? 'Cause I know a lot of people that can be intimidating, trying to figure out how maybe get started doing that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking about is, in terms of advice, is my school. So UNLV is where I went, and that's in Vegas, and they have a night and a day program. And the night program is obviously meant for people like me who are going to work as well. But I would give some hard thought as to which one you go to, because to me, school was just the thing that was in the way, or it was a necessary box to tick to get a job. And so there was more flexibility in terms of picking my classes if I took the day program. And so, and I did. And I also got done a full semester faster than I would have on the night program. So not everybody's going to be able to find a job at night. Obviously, the casino made that easy. But that's what I did. So I'd work from 7 at night to 4 in the morning, and then sleep a couple hours, and then go to school, and then come home and sleep an hour or two, and then go to work.
You're making this sound so easy.
Yeah, so I was just tired for 4 years. I remember there was a long stretch where I would wake up to go to work on Wednesday, and I would sleep again on Friday. But it was worth it, that's for sure. And I found little ways that hopefully will be helpful to somebody making the same choice to make it easier. Just as a quick example, there's a website called oea.org, and it's the audio recordings of the oral arguments at the Supreme Court. And I found that not as fast as I wish I had, but I had an hour commute to school and back, and then to work and back. So that's 4 hours almost every day in my car. And so I could download the cases that we were studying in con law and listen to the actual oral arguments, which, I mean, when you think about it, you're hearing the 11 most knowledgeable people talk about a case. But a tiny little funny story, if you'll indulge me, is that I listened to one of these cases, and I just thought, man, I know this case so inside and out. I heard them argue about it. I was just ready, and I sat in the front row, and I stared at my professor, like daring him to call on me. And it worked, and he did. And he just started digging into me on this case, and I was just firing back everything. And I thought, you met your match today, man. And he gets to the bottom, and he goes, or he gets to the late into it, and he says, well, where was the injury? And I said, I started looking at my notes, and he goes, it shouldn't be that hard. And I said, well, if you have my notes, it is, because I don't have it. And he goes, well, it's not a trick question. And he said it was in Vegas. And I was like, that literally is a trick question. And they didn't talk about that at the Supreme Court. So lesson learned, you can't rely only on that. But it was really helpful for somebody that spent 4 hours a day in their class.
Well, you must have had to been, and I actually, when you talk about studying during your commute, I found that really helpful as well, because I was living about 45 minutes to an hour away from law school my first semester, and I really made good use of listening to audio lectures. And then my girlfriend at the time, now wife, lived in Houston, and I used to commute to see her quite a bit, so I try to fill that time with studying. Mm-hmm. So I think one tip is, try to fill that dead time that you have with getting ahead and really knowing, getting ahead and studying. I find that people that go to law school later in life tend to do better because they treat it more like a job. Was that your experience?
For sure. I didn't have, aside from the obvious stuff, like I didn't have the ability to participate in the extracurriculars and the clubs and the fun part of law school. It was just work, and I just put in the work. But I definitely think that you already know what it took to be there, and most of the kids in law school they're performers, they're great people, they did great. But if you're there later in life, you've already worked to get there. You know what I mean? So, and our daughter was born. I left between classes to go watch her at preschool because it was such a traumatic event to leave her at preschool, and I remember leaving law school class to go, see if she was okay. I wasn't the only older person or parent, but it definitely makes you take it more serious.
Yeah, I remember there was one of my classmates had 2 kids and was pregnant during practice court at Baylor. And when I was thinking about her, I was like, she has it so much harder than I have. So anytime I found myself complaining, I just thought about how much more she had to juggle than I did.
Yeah. I tried to play that card once with the professor, and it went real flat real quick. So then I thought, all right, well, I better get this together and focus.
Well, what about, all right, so you graduate from law school, and how did you start figuring out what you wanted to do next? I was a huge Law & Order fan as well, and originally wanted to be a prosecutor before I found personal injury law. But where did you start looking? How'd you end up in Texas?
So we made a short list of cities that we'd want to live in. Neither of us wanted, my wife and I, we didn't want to live in Vegas. And Austin was on the list. We had some personal reasons that made it an option. I was pretty sure I would become friends with Lance Armstrong and we'd ride our bikes together if we lived in the same town. That didn't turn out to happen, but we came here to visit, and it was this bizarre weekend of like bliss where there was a pumpkin patch at Marble Falls and ACL, and there was an ice cream social in my friend's neighborhood. And so it was like, oh my God, this is where you got to go to raise a kid. As far as jobs go, one of the other things that made law school harder, or you could say more efficient, was that I didn't have the luxury of getting summer jobs, like with law firms, like most of the kids would do. Because I couldn't do that, because I had a job that I had to have, I did internships for credit. And so I did those all with the aim of being a prosecutor. And so I came out here. The family and I took a pretty big leap, and I applied to get an internship with the Travis County District Attorney's Office while we lived in Vegas, and I got it. So I took 8 weeks off from my job and came out here by myself and did that internship. And I loved it, and they wanted to hire me, but you have to start at the county prosecutor's office. And I was down to the last 2 people. And of course, like every law student, I was sure I'd get the job, but it just was going to take a long time. So we happened to be, the house that we rented in Austin was geographically close to your firm. And I just kept seeing it on the website. And every time I'd look, there was another office and there was another attorney. I studied you guys, and I just thought, man, I can't get it wrong. I'm too old. I can't work somewhere for 3 years and find out, oh my God, I work for that person. And so when I did finally beat you guys down enough to get an interview, I knew this was it. And it didn't matter to me what kind of law. Now I love it. But it wasn't about the law, it was about the firm.
That's great. Well, and I remember when you applied, I have a rule at my firm. If someone applies in person, we give them an interview. And Jason dropped off his resume in person, and I think that's what got your foot in the door.
Yeah, well, it was either that or the 800 emails, the LinkedIn messages.
I was leaving that part out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just took it because, if you put yourself in the mix with these college kids, it's just hard to stand out, and you got to get in front of somebody if you're going to have. For me, that was my best bet, was to meet someone that was going to make the decision and show that I was different than my resume.
100%. And I think that persistence is something that a lot of law students or people out of law school don't pay attention to. And what I always tell people when they're looking for a job, either as an attorney or anything else, pick the 2 to 3 jobs you really want and blow them out of the water with your resume, with your cover letter. Reach out to people that are associated with the company, opposed to throwing a scattershot approach and applying to 80 different places. I think your success rate goes way up, and you end up with a place you really want to, opposed to a place you just accidentally end up at.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I had applied. It was like 3 a.m. and I was looking at the job listings, and a firm here in Austin that does PI listed a job, and they said, if you want to be a trial attorney, you don't need any experience. You make $150,000 a year. Anyone can apply. And I sent my resume in instantly. I got up, I showered, I shaved, I put on a suit, and I went and waited for them to unlock the front door. And I asked if I could speak with the namesake. And they said, well, is he expecting you? No, he's not. I waited a few hours and he couldn't see me, so I left. I came back every day for 5 days, and not one time did one person ever speak to me except the receptionist. And I just thought, I don't want to work here. I mean, if that's, you wouldn't even come out and say, all right, I get it, we're not hiring or anything like that. So, and then, I've done some crazy stuff too to figure out if I was going to work at the right place. I think I've shared with you, I walked the parking lot to make sure, I don't want to work. I had a certain life that I wanted to achieve. And if the people that are ahead of me aren't achieving it, then that speaks to it. I've told people stories about the success of the attorneys in front of me at this firm. But I looked to where they lived. Do they live in nice neighborhoods? Do they have a nice car? Do they win cases? Are they respected? And I agree. Find the place you want and get it.
Well, and if you're looking to go into a consumer-based law firm as well, check out the reviews of the clients, because that really emanates into the whole practice of the firm. And a law firm that has a lot of angry clients is probably missing the boat on something. Doesn't mean they're bad lawyers, but something's a little off with their practice potentially.
For sure.
Get to know the other attorneys that work there. Look at their resumes. Is that something that you want to line up your career with? And does that match up? And I remember when you started at the firm, I was so impressed with how quickly you were able to deal with clients. And I think if you're going into a practice where you have to deal with either business clients or consumer clients, having that experience is really helpful. I remember the first week you worked here, I said, this person is going to be able to sign up any case that comes in the door. He may not know what he's talking about at first, but he'll get it signed up. Versus, you hire someone who's top in their class from a top 5 law school, they're not going to have those life experiences to relate to someone.
Yeah, and when you that's like probably the better tip for people that are trying to relate to somebody. That person still has something in common with the guy or the girl that's the potential client. The problem is they rarely look for that commonality, and really, you don't have to convince anyone. You just have to listen, honestly, right? I learned that selling cars, that the best car salesmen didn't really talk. They just listened. And the worst ones just yammered away on stuff. I just think you find that commonality, and then it's genuine. And if it's not, I've yet to meet somebody who you couldn't tell was forcing it or was pretending. Even really kind people that are doing it genuinely and want to connect when it's not real. It's, like you'll see somebody saying howdy or y'all when it's not natural to them. They're trying and it's a good heart, but yeah, you got to find the connection and just go with that.
And empathy is really important. I mean, putting yourself in the person's shoes, what are they thinking about? What are they going through? And I think for voir dire, jury selection, those skill sets really apply across disciplines, whether it's law or somewhere else. Being able to relate to people and listen to their concerns. And I really do think a lot of what we do is selling. We're trying to give our clients the best advocacy we can about their case, trying to explain to a client why they should hire our firm, trying to convince an adjuster why they should pay out on a claim, or why a defense attorney why they should pay out on a case. And all of it comes back to making good arguments, understanding what people's motivations are, and listening to their concerns.
Mm-hmm. And when you say voir dire, that reminds me of giving golf lessons. And I think I was pretty good at that, because I would look for something they already knew how to do physically, like bowl or go fishing or something. And if you could make an analogy of that to where they would know that feeling of the part of the golf swing you were trying to tell them, it would click. And I think that applies to just about everything, right? In voir dire, if you've got somebody that had a bad wreck and they had a terrible experience, you're not going to convince them that their experience was good, but you find the way that you can analogize their experience to what you're selling in a convincing way, and you could win them over, I think.
Well, and one thing I've been really impressed with your career is, you've really gotten to where most 15, 20-year attorneys are at in 5 years. And I always use you as the poster child of the example of someone who sits down and is determined, can really accelerate their growth. So what sort of tactics or things did you do to help accelerate your growth more quickly than maybe other lawyers?
I didn't wait for information to find me. I was pretty hard on myself. That's something we've joked about, where I punish myself before, I get a chance to be punished. But active trying to learn, I think a lot of the younger attorneys will need to see something 3 or 4 times, and then it's sort of learned through repetition. rather than seeing it and wanting to ask questions. And honestly, that makes I had meant to make sure I said that. The most important thing to me is having some humility. I remember being here early, and I was next to an attorney who'd been practicing 4 or 5 years, but we were new at the same time. And one of the senior attorneys asked, "Did we know what subrogation meant?" And I thought, I have no idea what that means. And I could tell neither did the other attorney. But they rambled off some answer, and I thought, you're just afraid to say you don't know what it is. And this person doesn't expect us to know what it is. And I find that has been to my benefit, is being willing to say I don't know it and I want to know it and then try to learn it, rather than pretending. I see a lot of people struggle for a while because they just won't admit they don't know what they're doing.
I think that's a great point. And honestly, I find that you get a lot more autonomy the more quickly you can establish you're going to speak up if you don't know the answer. Not knowing what you don't know is critical to being successful as a lawyer, because unless you have a photographic memory, it's really hard to memorize the right answer to every question that you're going to come across. But as you get more experience, you learn where to find the answer. What about, I've also been really impressed with how you set goals and then go after them and then achieve them. First, when you came to our firm, how did you go about setting about the goals that you wanted to accomplish?
Well, my goals were black and white, and they were, honestly, I think the structure of the firm helped the most part with that, because I'm not sure I would have been as structured goal-wise, but for the fact that we are here and you push us out of our comfort zone a lot, which has really been key to my progress. If anything, honestly, that one I'd defer to you, because so many times I was comfortable and you pushed outside of that, and then it led to the next level. But knowing what you want, if you may remember, I came to you and told you what I wanted, and I wasn't asking for it. I just asked, how do I get there? What's the plan? What do I need to do to get to this point in my career, and what do I need to do to get to the next point? And I think it kind of goes right back to the same thing, right? If you won't ask, you won't know, and you're guessing. And can you imagine you spend a year trying to do what it takes to do, the next thing, and you were wrong?
100%. And I think a lot of people don't take the time to ask that question. I can count on one hand how many attorneys have approached me and said, "Hey, here's where I want to get to career-wise. How do I get there?" And I remember that conversation. We sat down, we pulled out a piece of paper, and we wrote out, okay, here's where you want to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 18 months from now, and 2 years from now. And also, you've been really aggressive on working on different case types and really developing your knowledge base there. And you can tell you do the homework of researching an issue when a case comes across your desk, and really developing that skill set of learning what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, of course, everybody's not going to have the structure at our firm, but I've tried to tell people, you're never, ever, ever going to be told, no, you can't do work that I don't want to do. And so find a part of the case that the person above you doesn't want to do, and do that. Nobody's ever going to stop you from learning and helping. And so I think I saw some people have this sort of all or nothing attitude where, I can't quite handle this wrongful death trucking case, so I'm out. Well, you can't, but you can handle going to the inspection, and you can sit in and watch the depots, or you could read the depot transcripts, or you could just find something that you can be a part of, and then the next time a little more, and the next time a little more. That's how I tried to do it.
Well, and I think that's great. Take up space, volunteer to do things. I mean, if there's a deposition the day before Thanksgiving, say, hey, I'll take that one. I guarantee you someone in your law firm is going to say, great, go take that deposition. Inspections, if you're working at a personal injury firm, is another area where you can get a lot of good experience. And before you know it, people are going to say, hey, Jason, why don't we give him this case, because he's always volunteering. He did a great job for me on that task or assignment, and I can really rely on his work product.
Yeah, and if you're at a place where collaboration is encouraged, I mean, it still goes back to that, right? When you're in a big group, our meetings that we would have, the PI meetings, where we might whiteboard a case, I can remember speaking up. And later thinking, man, I wish I hadn't said that. But I can also remember many times saying something, having an idea that got used. And after the meeting, hearing from some of the people, well, everybody's younger than me, but some of the people newer than me that would say, oh, I was afraid to say something. And it was, I mean, there's all these great minds. Use them collectively and speak up.
Well, tell me, are there any other tips or tactics you want to leave with other attorneys that may be in similar boat as you?
Yeah, if you're thinking, I was trying to sort of brainstorm on some ideas for going to college at an advanced age. And one of them you touched with about applying. I had said, apply where you want to go. One of the things, I knew I was going to go to UNLV because I couldn't quit my job and we couldn't move. I knew what the target, what the score was to get in, what the GPA was to get in, and I made sure that I got in there. I applied at other places because I have an ego and I wanted to say I could have gone to some of these other places, but know where you want to go. Negotiate your offer. A friend of a friend had given me this book about first-year law school, and in it had said that you could negotiate your scholarship. And I did. I went in, and it was the most terrifying experience of my life, and I felt embarrassed afterwards, but it worked. It was a $20,000 move. Borrow as little as possible. And then the oya.org was one. And then what I did was I took the LSAT, the practice test, untimed, and figured out where my weaknesses were because I couldn't take the LSAT course. I could afford it because I was working, but it was a lot of time and I just couldn't do it. So I figured out what part of the LSAT I was weakest on, and I just hired a tutor to focus exclusively on that portion. It was less than the full class would have cost, and it got me much higher score than I had to have to get in. And then make friends who are good at notes or good at the thing that you're not, and pick wisely for a study group, because I was kind of a loner because of my situation, but I made 4 or 5 friends who were good at school and took it serious, and then we'd study. When it came time for finals, I would take some time off, a couple of days off, and do a study group. And that's how I survived law school.
That's great. Well, and if anyone wanted to reach out to you to ask questions, how could they get a hold of you?
Jason@zindalaw.com. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to share anything I can to help.
Great. Well, Jason, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you spending so much time here. And I got a lot out of this, and I'm sure a lot of other people did as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. It was a blast.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Effective Lawyer. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to rate it 5 stars and leave us a review. To get notified about new episodes that are upcoming or have been released, go to zdfirm.com/podcast. Sign up for our mailing list.